my dear friends. This is Rohini Moradi of Magic Inclined. I am so humbled and honored to be here with you today. When I first started this podcast, my intention was to share stories of spiritual awakening, as well as share my own big spiritual awakening after losing my daughter, Rishi. After telling her story and where it brought me, I came to a standstill and I couldn't keep going. So I had to pause on this podcast and really look within myself, only to realize that my mission in life, right now at least, is to build community, to bring magic humans together. And I have jumped in this pool as fast and far as I can. And I'm so honored to be able to bring you stories from real humans who have tapped into their own magic. Today, I sat down with Renée Camila of Buena Herbs to discuss energetic herbalism and awakening intuition to a point of being able to speak to flora. I really hope you enjoy this episode and you take away something beautiful from it that will ignite the magic within you. Enjoy listening. And please remember to like, share, comment, and rate this episode so more and more people can see it. Thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to hear what you think. Hello, dear friends. I have Renée Camila of Buena Herbs sitting with us today to tell us her story of how she became a folk herbalist. Renée has had her practice since 2016. She also has a beautiful line of offerings on her website, so please make sure to check those out. But welcome, Renée. We're so excited to have you here.
Hi, so happy to be here, Ro. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm so honored.
Yay! So Renée's actually launching our first practitioner spotlight course. And I've known Renée for a really long time, probably 10 years. I'm not sure how long we've known each other.
10 years.
Yeah.
I think 10 years, yeah.
It's mind-blowing.
Actually, my husband and I, my partner, we had our first date at your house. Do you remember?
I remember seeing you and I was like, who is this super cool person? And then I want to be her friend, but I'm too nervous to talk to her. And you're even at my house and I was too nervous to come and talk to you and be your friend. But
no, then you wanted me to try on some jumpsuits.
That's because at the end of the night, I was like, I got some kind of conversation. I have jumpsuits.
I was wearing a jumpsuit, and you did have beautiful jumpsuits.
And you're like, no, thank you. So much has happened in the last decade, obviously. I want to hear your journey because I remember, there was this time in the beginning where I got really obsessed with herbs, and we both got obsessed with herbs around the same time. And our paths always seemed kind of similar, but not exactly, we're our own people. But it's just it's been beautiful to watch you grow your practice and become this amazing herbalist that you are. The preface was because of how proud of you I am, and just growing something from that idea and that passion into what it is today is an incredible journey. And you've probably learned so much, and I want to pick your brain all day. So I don't know, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got interested in herbs and how you started your practice, or anything in the lines of that,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I remember we were both kind of weaving in and out of similar things that we were exploring and diving into around that time. And for me, it really started as I was really curious about natural perfumery. This is like over a decade ago. And then learning more about that to make my own perfume led me to aromatherapy. So then I started studying aromatherapy, and then had some issues with kind of like the extractive culture of aromatherapy and how much plant matter it takes to make like a couple drops of essential oil. And so that led me to whole plant medicine, which led me to herbalism, which led me to Karen and Sarah, my mentors, which led me to energetic herbalism. And so it's just kind of been like following my nose, but also it also feels like it was just inevitable. Like all my paths just like converged to lead to this point of dedicating my life to this work. Um, yeah, and so and in a way, it kind of feels like coming home. Like I come from a family of medicine people, healers, but they've all, like my parents and my grandparents' generation, are more into allopathic medicine. My grandfather was a doctor, my grandmother was a nurse. And so they very much kind of rejected our traditional medicine. And so, in a way, it feels like I'm healing our lineage by doing this work because I'm taking us back to like our indigenous roots and like our people's medicine. And so, I don't know, my family has like both colonizer and colonized in us. So, and so they're oftentimes at odds. And so herbalism is a way for me to like find a way to like bridge those, like to be the bridge for that. And it does a lot to heal my lineage and hopefully my children and my and the future generations.
Of course, that's so beautiful.
Thank you. Herbalism saved my life. I really
Oh,
truly feel that way. It's like I was like really I was lost for a long time. I think that's what colonization does to a lot of us, right? And so um it's given me like this purpose that's beyond just like my lifetime. And so it feels like really important. And there's nothing like learning about the plants that your ancestors worked with. Like it is so empowering and you can like feel it in your blood. Like working with copal as like a smoke clearing medicine, like it feels so different than working with like white sage because my ancestors have been in relationship with that plant, like
absolutely.
in our blood.
This brings up a really interesting question for me. I was recently um, teaching a class on the Akashic Records, which is what I do. And a question came up because we took the conversation to smudging your space to purify it before you enter the records, just so you can go in. But what I always have said is please choose a plant that is ancestrally aligned for you. And somebody asked, what if we don't know who our ancestors are? And I was stumped. I'm like, I need to ask Renee, what would you do? I would love to hear this.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I
Mhm.
think that just if there's a combination of things you could do. I think on one end you could work with like plants that are like really easily cultivated that have the same kind of clearing properties. Like garden sage has just as much clearing properties as white sage and isn't as endangered, you know? So working with plants that are like more abundant. Um, and then making relationship with land. So like if you there is like blood ancestry, you know, that comes from different parts of the world, but there's also like being a good ancestor on the land that you're on, like being a good guest on the land that you're on. And so you can work with like local plants, you know, like I grew up in San Francisco. Rosemary is abundant in San Francisco. Rosemary is also ancestral for me because of the Mediterranean. So like that part of Europe is a part of my ancestry. But rosemary is a great like garden variety that's really easy to grow, that's really abundant, that you can work with for smoke clearing. And I don't know, following your intuition, which I imagine has a lot to do with Akashic Records. I don't practice that line, but I'm really in awe of it because I feel like you kind of know the answers inside of you, you know?
Mhm.
You'll feel like a resounding yes when it's a plant that feels good. And you'll feel the resounding no if you're really paying attention. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
That absolutely helps. Intuitively, that's what I thought, but I did not answer the question because I really wanted to ask an expert like yourself. But that's amazing, and that it's like it's soothing information to be aware of as well, because this day and age, like, everyone is doing their best to be appropriate, or not everyone, but maybe the people in my circle that in my little echo chamber that I see. Um, but a lot of times there isn't much direction as to how to be that person. So herbalism is a radical act for that reason, and spreading this information that is so necessary for people to know is just it's beautiful, and it's needed. We need to hear this. We need to hear the things that our herbalist allies have learned thus far, so that we can further educate ourselves.
Mhm.
So
And
that's
I think like really looking towards like if the intuitive part feels hard, or um, if someone's looking for more like guidance, like I think looking towards like BIPOC leaders, like
mm,
Black and Indigenous leaders in different fields, like in herbalism, to help guide and to ask questions to, because I think the knowledge there is going to be different that we're going to get from Western, or what I like to call colonial herbalism.
absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people asked me after I presented the idea of an energetic herbalist class and taught by a folk herbalist. They asked, "What is folk herbalism?" So I thought I would ask you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. The way, I mean, I feel like it might be different for like different people. The way that I use folk herbalism is the idea that I'm not practicing. So there's Western herbalism, right? And that's primarily um, white male run, white cis male run. And then folk herbalism for me is like the medicine of the people. And so, on one way, you could say it's like our indigenous medicine. And so, like, to be clear, like, there's a distinction between people that are indigenous, like capital I, and then everyone is indigenous to somewhere. And so, like, finding um, our own like indigenous roots to practice within is I think an important part of it. And so yeah, folk just meaning like of the people, it's our medicine. And then the energetic piece, um, so the way that I was trained in energetic herbalism was by Karen Sanders and Sarah Holmes in the lineage of Karen. So Karen is Choctaw, and she was trained at the age of 7 by her grandmother in herbalism and in Choctaw herbalism. And so their school, Karen and Sarah's school, is taking on Karen's lineage. And so that the way that we're trained in energetic herbalism is not just the thermal energetics. I think a lot of the time in Western herbalism, you'll hear like the energetics as being like hot, cold, like
Mm.
dry, damp, which is fine, which is definitely a component of it. But the way that our understanding is of energetic herbalism is more from an indigenous perspective, that there's different layers of energy. So there's like the spirit level, then there's like the emotional level, and then there's the physical level. And that most imbalances are rooted in an emotional spiritual root. And so to go to that area first for healing rather than going towards the physical. So lower dosages, really working from the idea that we can affect energy on different densities if we work from the emotional spiritual level first. And so looking at the body holistically, and like understanding that like diabetes has as much to do with racism as it does to do with like an emotional spiritual imbalance within the body, an emotional spiritual root. um, yeah, and so that's kind of, it's a really beautiful way of looking at plants, like the idea that plants are people, that they're just as whole as we are. And so like building relationships that have intimacy in the way that we would do with friendships and lovers and family, and then working with people from that same point of intimacy, to really kind of facilitate, or really just facilitators of relationships between people and plants, so that people can empower themselves to do their own healing.
That's beautiful. So in a way, you're a translator.
Yeah, totally. It's
So
I tell
cool.
people all the time, it's like, I'm not actually doing the work. I'm just like trained enough to know these plants, and I'm looking at you as an energetic body, as
Mhm.
energy, and then I put you in relationship with plants and y'all do the work together.
I love it. That's beautiful. That's what we are as like Akashic Records practitioners as well. We're just translators. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I see so many parallels from like the energy standpoint of like how, yeah, how we work together.
Yeah. I mean, we're all working together, even if we're not intending to, right?
Yeah. Especially if we're not intending to.
Thank you so much for listening so far. If you're interested in joining our magic community, please visit magicincline.com. We would love to have you. And if you want to sign up for Renee's upcoming energetic herbalism class, you can do so on the website as well. We're looking forward to having you.
What is one thing you would change during the process of learning energetic herbalism? Like, what's one thing that you're like, maybe I should have done it this way? Or even setting up your store, like as a business owner. And,
Yeah.
it's kind of it's a loaded question, but, my main goal in life is to empower people to find this shine that you have found in yourself, and to bring them closer to that so that they can use that as the currency in life. It's just like we figured that part out. And mine might change. So I'm not saying I figured everything out, but a lot of people are still looking. And in that early phases, like when we're looking, it gets really confusing and dark and you don't know which way to go. So this question, while it is loaded, it could shine a light in a tunnel for somebody. So I don't know. What's one thing that you would have done differently in the beginning of either
Mhm.
becoming a business owner or an herbalist or even learning energetic herbalism? Anything along the lines of that?
I love this question so much. Thank you so much for asking it because I think, like, kind of like to what you're alluding to, a lot of the time, the way that things are set up, especially with social media, like, we don't see the behind the scenes. Everything's just like, you don't see all the work that goes behind anything. Everything just looks so like picture perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that, like, one thing I know exactly how to answer this question because I want to be really transparent about it because I'm hoping that it also helps to hear. But so when I first started practicing, actually, before I started my clinical practice, when I was just a medicine maker, I called my business Sisters of the West. And I've since changed it for a variety of reasons, but mainly because it became more and more apparent to me that so at the time I was only working with native plants to so-called California, where I was born and raised. And it just was getting more and more, it was getting harder for me. It was getting more complicated for me to just work with native plants. The more that I was learning about like indigenous sovereignty and like, yes, I have indigenous ancestry, but of a different place. And my indigenous ancestry is Chorotega of Central America. Um, but it was feeling hard for me to be a guest on land working only with native plants. And even though I wasn't wildcrafting and I was doing it in a way that I felt respectful, it felt like I was commodifying something that um, already has a complicated relationship. And so I ended up, and also just like the word West feels hard for me. I'm like, West of where? Like, West of who decided this was the West? Like, it's such a colonial word. And so, yeah, I slowly transitioned away from working with just native plants to include more accessible plants, like plants that I could find at the grocery store more easily. Also, as a way of modeling that for my students, like that you don't have to work with these like really rare plants. You can work with really accessible plants and get just as good of medicine, if not better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's like more in harmony with the earth and is better for the earth. And then I transitioned, yeah, so I was transitioning towards working with like more accessible plants, and then I decided that I wanted to change the name to be more representative of who I am and less like ambiguous about who I am. And so Yerba Buena is the plant. I love it, both indigenous to so-called California, but there's also a variety in Nicaragua, where my family's from, that we cook with, that we like. That's a very medicinal plant. So also, San Francisco used to be called Yerba Buena, which is where I was born and raised. There's like all these little synchronicities that felt good. But yeah, I think what I love about this question so much is that I'm the more that I the more that I go into this world, like the farther I go down this path, like the more I realize that I want to shift things, or um, I make mistakes, or I learn a better way to be in right relationship with the land and the people, that I'm serving. And so I think it's important to like be flexible and just know that, you know, we're all just doing our best for the most part. And so we can make mistakes and we can improve, or we can, I don't know, evolve
Yeah.
to be
Evolve.
like, yeah,
It doesn't
it
happen
feels.
overnight, right? Sorry
It
to.
doesn't. No, no, no. I like, and what I love so, I mean, you were there for that whole journey. You witnessed that whole thing happen, and I love it, and I appreciate like how I got to where I am now, and I couldn't have done it had I not gone through those doors that I did. Um, but I feel so much more rooted in who I really am now, and I think that was part of it too. Is I didn't really know who I was then, you know. But then really doing this work and working with Karen and Sarah, like that's why I say herbalism saved my life. So I'm like,
Oh,
oh, I didn't know who I was before. Like I didn't know what it meant to be in my power. Like
yeah.
I didn't know how to access my intuition. And now I'm like, oh, I can get there. Like I know what that feels like now. But it was a journey.
That's so cool though, but I mean, we have to start somewhere, you know? I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of people get overwhelmed and they want to get to the end point, which there really isn't one, but they want to get to the point where everything's just working out without going through the journey. But without that journey and learning about ourselves, then the actual thing doesn't really have any meaning, you know? Like, what if you
Yeah.
just went straight to energetic herbalism without going through that journey? Like, would you feel like it would be as enriching as it is, you know? Like,
No, and I think an important, like Estela Roman, who's a curandera in Oaxaca, talks about um, like different elements that are needed for it to be a healer, and one of them is to be humble. And I feel like that is like making mistakes publicly, and
yeah.
like doing, not like wanting to get to the end and be like perfect and great and totally educated and expert. Like you can't get there without doing all the work and like along the way, and the journey is deeply humbling, and being humble is an important part of being a healer or doing anything in the healing arts. And so I see that, and it's just a part of it.
Absolutely. I'm only giggling because we were talking about the newsletter I sent out with like a horrible head cold. You can kind of still hear it in my voice, but it was just like I made every mistake I could publicly, like pressed send. But this is just like an idea, not an idea, but this is a habit of mine, and that's why I'm laughing about it. It's because I've gotten too comfortable making mistakes publicly at this point where it's like it doesn't matter. The band-aid like doesn't hurt when you pull it off now.
Mm,
You know, it's like, oh well, there you go again. Now next time I have to use my editing app that I have already, which I didn't use.
right. And our worst critics are usually ourselves, right? Like we are our own worst critics. I don't think anyone ever cares as much as I do about the mistakes I make.
No, I was like, whatever, okay.
Yeah.
Like, no, but that word that was supposed to be before that word. This is where the rebel in me comes out too. It's just these parameters that,
Mhm.
our society puts around us sometimes make it so difficult to just be free in our power. And that's why any type of energy work or healing work requires breaking those barriers, and they are not easy barriers to break. So
Yeah.
talking to someone like yourself who's broken these barriers and had to go inward and look at themselves and rearrange things it's so beautiful and also so humbling, because it's something that anyone can do if they just put an effort towards it.
Mm. Yeah, and it reminds me like something that my mentor Karen Sanders always says is you're only able to go as deep with the plants as you're willing to go in yourself.
Hmm.
And then same with clients, like you can only go as deep with your clients as you're willing to go with yourself. And like really the work starts there. It's like really needing to go deep. And so did you hear that?
It's okay. It happened to me earlier too. See, we're talking about making
Yeah.
mistakes.
Yeah. Like real life came in. It's probably some political phone call that you get like a million of them a day now, or they're trying to
I
get me to
know.
do something.
I
Uh,
know.
but yeah, it feels significant to just be like learn how to be vulnerable with ourselves, and to really love ourselves along the way.
What's the one thing that you're most proud of yourself for on this journey?
Ooh, that is not coming easily to me.
I know, I know. We're always it's back to the critic part, like,
Yeah. I mean, I'm honestly really proud that I started my practice. I was like, I mean, yeah, or teaching. Both of those things, like teaching and starting my practice, were both these things that I like deeply, deeply wanted to do, that I knew I needed to do, that I was supposed to do.
Mhm.
And yet I had a lot of fear of like, am I good enough? Am I enough? Like, am I going to do this right? And like, am I qualified?
Mhm.
Like, does anyone care? Like what I have to say if I teach, or like, am I going to be able to actually facilitate a relationship between a plant and a client in the right way?
Mhm.
And it was like things that my mentors had been telling me for a long time, like, you're ready, do it. And I was like, okay, just a little bit longer. And then I don't know, I just like finally, with my practice, it was because I started doing more advanced work with Karen and Sarah. And that was one of the requirements to continue studying with them, was that I needed to have my practice. And so they kind of just like pushed me through the door.
Mhm.
And then with teaching, it was really, I put it off for a long time. I was really scared. And I have it now. It's so funny. Like, I can't even really remember what I was scared of. Like, I know in my head what I was scared of, but like, I can't really feel it in my body anymore.
Mhm.
But I really credit my colleague and friend, Sam Roberts, with really pushing me, with really like encouraging me, not pushing. They were really supportive. And I taught my first class with them. We like co-taught it, and then
Mhm.
we taught more classes together. And then I started teaching on my own. I was like, okay, wait, like I actually really like this. Like, my mom's a teacher. I've been doing radio. Like, I've been on the radio show for like a few years now. So I'm like, I don't know why I was so scared of teaching, but yeah, I think sometimes our fears just get in the way, even though we know like in our heart that it's what we're supposed to do.
I think
And
that's why the
sometimes it's like,
fear.
yeah, it's like the scariest things are like the ones that are the most meaningful.
Hmm.
So I'm proud
Totally.
of myself for actually doing it.
I'm proud of you too. The world needs you. This is beautiful.
Thanks, Ro.
That is a real thing though, being afraid of our power. That's the thing. I took these psychic classes last year. I'm just like nonstop into like taking any class I can right now.
Oh my God, me too. I love the eternal student. Same.
Yeah, I mean, as teachers, we have to be eternal students anyway.
Hmm.
But during the class, I'm like, I don't know if I can read somebody's energetic field. What are you talking about? And he's like, you're one of those. I'm like, what? You're afraid of your own power. What if you did this and it worked out? What if? And then,
Mind blown.
yeah, and then what if it doesn't? Like, you'd be in the same spot. You wouldn't like fall into a deep hole or something. Like, it wouldn't change. But if you tried it and it worked out, your life could change. And it could change for the better. And this is this is the journey. People get exhausted thinking about a journey, I think, like where is this going to take me? But it seems like in my experience at least, like once you let go and surrender to the journey and turn that nervousness into excitement, like magic happens. It just
Yeah.
things click. and become,
Yeah. Well, once
yeah.
we get out of our own way, like once we get out of our heads and into our hearts, it's like we look at kids like both of them. I look at my son who's 2.5, and like he is so heart driven. Like he doesn't question things the way that adults do. Like, and I remember myself as a kid, I was like, I talk to plants. And like then when I got older, I was like, is this weird that I'm doing this? But as a kid, I was like, I can totally understand what they're saying. I'm talking to them and I'm communicating, and like you could see spirits, and like
Mm.
it's just so much easier when you're not in your head. And so like you're saying, like really surrendering, getting out of the head into the heart, getting out of our own way,
Mhm.
because usually the answers are within us already.
They really are. Here's another question for you. So do you have like a technique that taps you into being able to read energy? Do you have like a go-to, um, I don't know, technique or something you use, whether it's an object or it's a practice?
I mean, it's a practice for sure. It depends on like which what I'm like what energy I'm reading. Usually it involves like breathing exercises to get into your heart. We call it heart breathing.
Mm.
And then from there, something that Karen and Sarah trained us in is we call it emptying. So it's basically like an energetic practice to like empty like any of our preconceived notions of things. And so that we're really able to just like receive the information from the heart, from like the heart brain.
Mm.
Um, and it's a practice. It takes like incredible practice. It's like a muscle that you have to practice every single day. And sometimes some days are easier than other days. Um, Sometimes you're like really able to drop in quickly, and sometimes it's like it's an effort to relax. Because it really is about like relaxing and surrendering in order to receive. And if you have any tension, that's like a resistance. It's not as easy to access. And um, yeah, it sounds, they're like things that we know, like it sounds so like broad, but it really is like it's a physical embodied practice that you have to keep working on, you know. It's like
Yeah,
exercise.
totally. And breath work is a great way to get there. That's
Yeah.
really smart. That's great advice. Is there anything you'd like to add? Any kind of advice you'd want to give somebody who is thinking about starting something new, has an idea, um, and is scared? Is there any advice you have for that?
I mean, I think community. Like, I remember when I was first starting Sisters of the West, I didn't know anything about business. And I called you, Ro, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. You started a million businesses. What do I do? And you were like, oh, it's so easy. And you just like laid out like what offices I need to call, what paperwork I needed, like, and it was like being able to lean on you for like the business side of things, and like leaning on friends that were herbalists for like the support of like developing, formulas that I felt comfortable like sharing with, besides outside of my like circle of loved ones that I wanted to share publicly that were safe, and um I think there's a big learning curve in the beginning of like, where do I source bottles from? Where do I source plants from? Where do I source labels from? And so doing it in community is like, it's going to save you so much time, and it's going to feel so much better because you're not alone. And so like, yeah, I think that would be my biggest that's what I was really grateful for me in the beginning. It was still a big learning curve, but I feel like because I had people like you in my life that were helping me kind of figure out the stuff that felt really hard and overwhelming for me, then I wasn't as like, I was able to like kind of quiet the voices in the back of my head that were like, you can't do this, because I had people outside me being like, you can totally do this. Let me show you how to do this. So yeah, and like getting good teachers, like mentors, like mentorship is like Karen and Sarah are my everything. Like I owe them my life. Like have they've held me, they've taught me, they've like, I think having good mentors that, I can like feel really proud to acknowledge every single time I talk about this work. because I love them so much and I'm so grateful to them feels really important. So, like, get yourself a good teacher, someone you trust.
I love that advice. That's so important. Sometimes for me, especially in the beginning, like I was in a total ego trap where I'm like, I could do everything by myself, but it takes so much longer when you do it by yourself. And you have to learn so many more lessons where the advice of community is perfect and just that's it. There's no other words. Thank you for sharing that. It's a very important share.
Thank you for being in my community.
Oh my god, thank you. And for those of you who are watching, you can see Renee's bottles to the right top of the screen. If you
Oh, yeah.
if you're not watching, go and visit her website, laYerbabuenaherbs.com, and check out her beautiful line. I remember when you were first sourcing the bottles, and you got those like amber bottles with like the beautiful white print on them. I'm
I
like,
was
oh
screen
my
printing.
goodness, it was so beautiful. And at the same
Thank
time, it's when
you.
I was like on my 2-year journey to to get Royal Spirit off the ground. Do you remember how frustrating or how frustrated I was during that time?
Yeah, it was a big project. Yeah.
But I couldn't find screen
The right.
printers the way
Mhm.
you did, and I was like, I contacted the people you sent me to as well, and like, no, we do these bottles, and I'm like, oh man. Ugh. But I remember like seeing your bottle and just like it sang to me when I saw it. It was so pretty. I still have it. I'm
Oh,
like,
thank you.
but
I
yeah,
know I haven't screen printed in a while, but I love that process. They look so elegant and you can wash them and reuse them and you don't have to deal with labels. It's so great.
oh, so beautiful. Yeah, friends, if you want to do yourself a favor, go check out her site right now and look at her beautiful packaging. Even with the labels you have now, it's just beautiful packaging, like the images and everything. It's
Thank you.
really
My
well done.
sister, speaking of community, she does all the artwork because
Oh,
she's a graphic designer and artist. So really
that's
lean
so
on the people around you.
absolutely
Yeah.
so beautiful. I want to thank you so much for being here with us today and all the beautiful shares that you gave us. What a gift. Thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you, Ro. I'm so honored to be here and I'm really excited about the class and I just like love and appreciate you so much. So thank you for the work that you do in the world.
Oh, thank you. We'll catch you guys soon.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it. Please remember to like, comment, and share so that we can spread the magic everywhere. Looking forward to next time.